Did you ever meet someone who seemed just too perfect, always smiling, always composed, always saying the right thing? But something in your gut whispers, something's off, you can't explain it, but you feel it. Now, here's the truth that might shock you. The most dangerous people aren't always loud, angry, or aggressive. Sometimes they're the ones who are calm, too calm, polite, spiritual, even inspiring. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in modern psychology, gave us a powerful warning. The people we should be most cautious of are the ones who have no awareness of their own shadow. By the time we finish this, you might look at the people around you and even yourself in a completely different light. And not just because you'll see more clearly, but because you'll understand why some people act the way they do, even when they don't. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever flinched from a compliment or smiled while quietly swallowing your frustration? That quiet, subtle tug inside? That's often your shadow speaking up. Jung believed that every person carries a shadow side, a part of ourselves we hide, deny, or suppress. It's not just the obviously negative stuff. It can be pain, jealousy, rage, unspoken dreams, buried creativity. Even the need for affection that we were told made us weak. We learn early on to create a version of ourselves that feels safe and acceptable to others. This version is what Jung called the persona. It's the face we show the world, the way we act in front of colleagues, friends, even family, and we wear it so often, we start to believe it's all we are. But behind that socially polished mask is the real story, the one that includes every part we pushed away because we were told it was too much, too selfish, too emotional, too ambitious. Think back to when you were a child. If you cried and someone said, "Stop being a baby," or if you showed anger and were scolded, those emotions didn't vanish. You just learned to hide them. Bit by bit, year by year, that shadow grows. Now, here's where the danger begins. Just because we suppress these parts of ourselves doesn't mean they go away. The shadow doesn't die, it waits, and it doesn't wait passively. It shows up in unexpected ways. Have you ever lashed out at someone you love and felt surprised by your own reaction? Or found yourself saying yes to things you didn't want, then feeling secretly resentful later? That's your shadow speaking. It's like a beach ball held underwater. You can force it down, but eventually it's going to pop up. The longer it's held, the more force it returns with. People who act like they have no shadow, they're not saints, they're often time bombs, and what makes this more difficult is they truly believe in their own perfection. They'll say things like, "I never get angry," or "I'm always fair." But Jung taught us this kind of thinking is a form of spiritual blindness. It's a refusal to see reality, and the less we acknowledge our shadow, the more power it has to control us from behind the scenes. Sometimes this shows up in ways we overlook. People who believe they're the most moral can often be the most judgmental. They justify harshness as honesty, manipulation as protection, emotional control as love. Because in their mind, they're doing the right thing. They can't see the harm they're causing because they believe they couldn't possibly be part of the problem. Think of someone in your life who insists they're always doing what's best. Someone who takes pride in being the good one. But behind that goodness, there's often quiet rage, disappointment, or fear, and it leaks out in sarcasm, in backhanded compliments, in decisions that hurt others. That's why Jung didn't fear the openly flawed. He feared the ones who claimed to have none. And when you encounter someone like this, that gut feeling you get, that unease, even if you can't explain it, it's often your intuition picking up on that unreconciled shadow energy. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman named Nora in her early 70s who joined a grief support group after losing her sister. She was quiet at first, always listening, always nodding. People assumed she was just deeply spiritual. But one day the facilitator asked, "What are you most afraid to say out loud?" Nora sat frozen. Then she said quietly, I resented my sister for most of our lives, and now that she's gone, I don't know how to forgive myself." The room fell silent. It was the most honest thing anyone had said. That confession changed everything, not just for Nora, but for everyone in the group. Her shadow, buried under decades of niceness, finally had a voice. And in speaking it, she found peace, and that's the paradox of the shadow. It hides behind perfection, but the moment you bring it into the light, it loses its power to hurt you. Here's another example. A man named Greg had spent his life as a pastor, beloved by his community, never a harsh word, but his daughter, now in her 40s, said she never really felt close to him. She said, "He was kind to everyone, except himself. He kept this lid on tight, like if he showed weakness, the whole house would collapse." When Greg retired, he started seeing a counselor. He admitted to being afraid of anger, of sadness, even of joy. He called emotions too messy. Slowly, through therapy and quiet reflection, Greg began to write poetry. Not for anyone else, just for him. His daughter said, "It was like I finally met the man behind the mask." The shadow doesn't want to shame you. It wants to be seen. Once Greg allowed space for his feelings, his relationships softened. And more than that, he softened. So how do you begin facing your shadow? Start by noticing your reactions. When do you feel unusually angry or defensive? When do you judge others harshly? What behaviors in others irritate you the most? Those are clues. The shadow lives in our emotional reactivity. It shows up when we feel shame, jealousy, or resentment. It shows up in the stories we tell ourselves about what we can't do or shouldn't want. Journaling can be powerful. Ask yourself, what part of me do I keep hidden from others? What am I afraid people will find out about me? What would I say or do if I felt completely safe? These aren't easy questions, but answering them, even just for yourself, begins to lift the mask. Another helpful step is paying attention to who you criticize. Often, what we judge in others is what we deny in ourselves. If you find yourself constantly annoyed by someone's confidence, maybe there's a part of you that wishes you could be more assertive. If someone's emotional openness feels too much, maybe your own feelings have been ignored for too long. There's also healing in conversation. Talking with a therapist, coach, or even a close friend who won't judge can help you explore your shadow without fear. Sometimes, just saying out loud what we've been hiding is the first step toward peace. You may find that as you become more comfortable with your own flaws and darker emotions, your relationships start to change. You might become more patient with others. Less reactive, more grounded. Frank's story reminds us of this too. He was a man in our community, retired, cheerful, polite to everyone. But when his wife left him after nearly 40 years, he admitted something heartbreaking. "I thought staying calm was love, but I was hiding, even from myself." He started journaling, opening up to his children, and slowly stepping into the emotional world he'd ignored. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. Another example? Picture yourself as a lighthouse. If you're dimming your light because you're afraid others might be blinded by it, you're not helping anyone. You don't serve the world by shrinking. Think of someone you admire, someone who feels comfortable in their skin. They're not perfect, but they own their story. They can admit when they're wrong. They can laugh at themselves. That's shadow work in action. Jung believed that aging gives us the perfect opportunity to finally become whole. 2. Stop pretending, to let go of roles we no longer need to play. That's why shadow work is especially powerful after 50. You've lived through enough to know what matters. Now it's time to free yourself from the fear of being anything other than fully human. Let yourself feel. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself be proud of the parts you once hid. When you embrace your shadow, you don't become darker, you become real. So the next time someone seems too perfect, too polished, too quick to say they're always good, take a breath. Ask yourself, What are they not seeing in themselves? And maybe, if you find yourself over-explaining your kindness or avoiding your own emotions, pause. Ask, what part of me am I ready to bring back into the light? Wholeness isn't about being flawless. It's about being fully, unapologetically you. If this resonates, share your thoughts below. Have you ever confronted your shadow or met someone who refused to see theirs? Let's keep the conversation going. This community exists to help us grow together. And if you haven't already, follow Smart Advice 50 for more insight into psychology, emotional healing, and the beauty of aging with awareness, because the more we understand ourselves, the more peaceful, powerful, and present we become. And always remember, facing your shadow doesn't make you broken, it makes you whole. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and never stop growing.